Welcome to Everyday SHEroes, hosted by Susan Hitchcock. Today, we'll be featuring Dr. Stephanie Gordon, who lives a very multifaceted life as a double certified general OBGYN and urogynecologist, an entrepreneur, and a wife and mother to 3 wonderful daughters. Sit back and enjoy.
Growing up as an only child, I was like an avid reader, right? Because you don't have siblings. So there's not a lot of people to play with. So my parents took me obviously to the library every week. And so I became like a self-taught learner. Anything I wanted to know, there was no internet then. You had to go to the library and look it up and look at encyclopedias or microfiche or microfilm. So I learned to find, I think, information that I desired very early. And that made me kind of a self-taught learner and kind of have an intellectual curiosity. Like I always want to know the answer to things. And so that library exposure and very literary education from my parents was helpful because that helps me in every part of my life. Like if I want to figure out how to do a new surgery, or if I want to figure out that there's a device out there that could help my patients, I don't just wonder, I actually will stop and do the research and dig, kind of like a little honey badger. And I was always kind of in a hurry to do stuff too. So I graduated high school at 16 and was in a hurry to get going and get started. And so I went to Georgia Tech at 16, skipping my senior year of high school. And I don't know that that was really a good idea now, looking back on it, because I may have been smart or book smart, but I was probably could have used a little bit more maturity. So going to Tech at 16 and hitting the academic difficulties and all the social difficulties of being that young and living in a dorm and joining a sorority and going to parties. And so that was a bit overwhelming. And so that did make me step back a second because it was a rough quarter. My first quarter at Tech, I think I made a B, a D, and an F my first quarter. So it is possible to rebound from a 1.1 GPA your first quarter. And then my mom was sort of like, what in the world? Because I figured out how to pay for school too. I went and applied for a full scholarship from Swift Textile Mills in Columbus, Georgia. They made all the denim for Levi jeans back in the day. And so they paid for Tech, but I had to keep a GPA. And so 1.1 was not going to cut it. And so I've quickly got it together and figured out how to study and how to organize my time and how to keep my scholarship the next quarter. But I do think it's just kind of the hustle and to figure it out. When you're in a difficult situation, don't just stay there. It's kind of keep moving and find a solution. And that's sort of been the theme of my life. Finished Tech, applied for med school, got waitlisted. So I was like, okay, all right, that's not going to happen easily. So then I went and got a job, and I was a drug rep, and I had a great job as a pharmaceutical rep, and then applied again and got in med school the next year. So, it's just sort of pivoting and being creative and being resourceful, I think, is where everything started. And that goes into parenting and marriage and, retail that we're doing now too. I did regular OBGYN for 2 years, back in 2001 and 2002, but I had 2 children 15 months apart also. And one of my first child was a preemie. So she was like 3 months early. So those kids are like 12 months apart by due date. So it was pretty Irish 20 and a little crazy while I was doing OBGYN. And then after I had Annie, in 2003, I quit the practice that I had joined straight out of residency and started my own GYN practice, mostly just to have control of my destiny, control of my schedule, control of my call schedule. And I stopped doing OB because you can't do OB by yourself without a partner. You just can't. You can't be on call every night of the year. So I kind of regrouped again with the two babies. I didn't really plan to leave my practice, but it became apparent they weren't ready for a partner, and I was ready to buy in. And that had been the path laid out for me with them. But when push came to shove, they were like, we don't want a partner. We want an employee. And I was like, that's not okay. So I kind of quit. I think Annie was a week old. Ella was a year old. Annie was a week old. And I came home from that meeting that we were supposed to sign the partnership papers. And I was in bed with Annie, and David came home and said, well, how did the meeting go? And I said, well, I kind of quit. And he was like, you did what? Because we had the insurance through them, and I was still a C-section, postpartum, all this stuff. And so I think I cried that afternoon. And then the next morning I got up and read my contract and read the restrictive covenant. I couldn't be 2 years, 10 miles from the other practice. So I drew a little circle around the other practice and went 10 miles, 11 miles east to Conyers with the 1-year-old and the 1-week-old in the double stroller, and knocked on the door of Rockdale Hospital. And I've been really lucky that people have been put in my life that have been mentors and people who show me the way when there's not necessarily a way. And there was a man named David Huber there who had gone to Tech, who was a doctor, and he was the president CMO at Rockdale at the time. And he told me to come in the office, leave the babies with the secretary, and we sat down and talked. And he, at the end of that meeting, offered me emergency privileges at the hospital, took me to an office that Rockdale owned, and gave me a lease that day. And it worked out. And so from 2003, I've had my own private practice. I was alone at first, but now I have 6 providers and 30 employees and 2 locations. So he met with us and we told him our vision, and he was like, that sounds great. So he sold it to us. And then we started demo and construction, and it's actually a building that was built in 1900, and it was the old Masonic Lodge, the Mason Lodge. And it was 3 stories with a basement, but the top floor fell in with the flood in the 20s or something. And it's a majestic building. And we got some architects from Athens who do historic preservation, and they've done some award-winning things in Athens. And they were like, this is our type of project. They loved it. They were like, gorgeous building, bookstore, bar, like who couldn't get behind that? And so it took about 18 months to renovate, and with everything, the roof, the HVAC, the floors, everything. And we opened in January of 2019, and we had an awesome first year, and then COVID hit. And we were very affected by COVID because we were retail, a bar, like a restaurant, cafe, and an event space. And all those things were non-essential, right? So we closed down for quite a bit, did online shopping. We did virtual shopping. People bought gift cards from us to support our staff. And we made it through, got a little tiny bit of PPP, and we're really up and running really well again in 22. But it was 2 years of pretty rough, but we made it, and now things are much better. And we have events all the time upstairs. We have Alice in Wonderland Tea Party last weekend. We have author events. We have a nursing appreciation day with a local author last week. We're doing a stuffed animal sleepover Friday where the kids leave their lovey with us, and we read stories to them, and we put them to bed in these little pillowcases I've made, little beds, and the kids have story time and cookies and milk, and they leave their lovey. And then the next morning they pick up their lovey, and we're going to give them a little report card and a picture like, Black Panther was pretty bad. He stayed up late and talked, and he was climbing the ladder, or something. And so we're going to do those little pictures of them being mischievous, and then they'll pick up their kid. So, that's super fun. And that's stuff we're doing for the community. We have 10 book clubs. We have beer tastings and wine tastings. We have weddings. We've had funerals upstairs. We do a lot of internal events, but then people rent the space for their graduation parties or their weddings or their baby showers. So it's a really fun place to be. Yeah, I think do what you love, because it does seem like if I write it down on paper or you say it back to me, it seems like I do a lot. But I also like most of everything that I do, and that's so cliched, like do what you love and it doesn't seem like work, but it's true. Like I don't get beaten down by the work that I do. I enjoy it. I find it valuable. I find it meaningful. I find it noble, and so it doesn't, even though it's work and you get tired, it doesn't seem like a burden. Now, having said that, I don't want to keep this pace up forever. But I do think it's hard for people to find what they love. And I work with great people. I have a good support system, a team that we've built that reads my mind and anticipates my needs. And that is huge. Delegate, ask for help. But at the end of the day, figure out what it is that you think is fun. Your work should be fun.